Emma had always loved quiet streets, the kind where you could hear your own footsteps on the sidewalk and the wind rustling through the trees. When she and Jake moved into this small brick house on the corner of Willow Lane, it felt like the kind of peace they had been searching for months. The city had been relentless, always loud and crowded, leaving them both exhausted. This little neighborhood, with its trimmed lawns and friendly neighbors, seemed like a new start. But even in a place meant for calm, surprises had a way of finding. The first evening, Emma noticed him. She had been carrying a box into the kitchen when she paused by the window, wiping sweat from her forehead. Across the street, in the old brick house that looked like it had stood there for decades, one of the upper windows was open. The light inside was soft, a warm yellow glow spilling onto the small front yard. She could see a man sitting at a desk, his back slightly hunched, his hands moving over a notebook. His brown hair caught the light, and he paused often, as if thinking, staring out the window toward them. "Jake," she called, pointing. "Look, there's someone across the street." Jake leaned against the doorway, trying not to spill the box in his hands. "Yeah, so?" he asked, glancing lazily. "Old house. People have lights on sometimes." Emma frowned. There was something about the way he looked like he was waiting, like the open window wasn't an accident. She turned back, catching his gaze for just a second, and felt a strange flutter in her chest. He looked away quickly, pretending to be busy again, but she had seen it. Over the next few nights, Emma noticed a pattern. The window remained open at the same time each evening. Sometimes he sat at the desk, sketching in the notebook. Sometimes he stood by the window, holding a cup of tea. Every time he glanced toward her house, almost as if he knew she was watching. At first, Emma thought it was coincidence. Maybe he liked the breeze or needed light for his work. But after a week, she realized it was more than that. She tried to explain it to Jake. "He keeps leaving the window open for us. I don't know, maybe he wants to be seen." Jake shrugged, half listening as he unpacked dishes. "Or maybe you're imagining things." Emma didn't answer. She couldn't explain the way her heart seemed to respond when she caught him watching. It wasn't just curiosity, it was something deeper, a pull she hadn't felt in years. Every evening she found herself by the window, pretending to water the plants or adjust the curtains. But really, she was waiting to see him, to catch that fleeting smile or the quick glance that made her pulse race. The street was quiet at night. Sometimes the soft hum of a lawnmower or distant laughter of children at play would break the stillness. But mostly it was just them, the houses, and the open window across the street. Emma imagined what his life might be like. Perhaps he was lonely, like she sometimes felt. Perhaps he too noticed the way she paused by the window. The way she lingered in the soft light of her living room. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees and the sky turned a soft pink, Emma saw him wave. It was almost imperceptible, a small movement of his hand that might have gone unnoticed by anyone else. But to her, it felt monumental. She froze, holding the curtain slightly open, her heart beating fast. Jake, sitting on the porch steps, didn't notice. He was scrolling on his phone, oblivious to the moment. Emma didn't know what to do. Should she wave back? Smile? Pretend she hadn't seen it? In the end, she did nothing, letting the moment linger in silence. That night she couldn't sleep. She kept imagining what it would be like to cross the street, to knock on his door, to speak the words that hovered between them in the quiet evenings. But she didn't. She stayed in her room, staring out at the darkened street, wondering if tomorrow would be the same, if the window would be open again. Days passed. Emma found herself adjusting her schedule to match his. She lingered in the living room longer, pretended to water the plants later in the evening, found excuses to glance toward the old brick house. Each night he was there, sometimes sketching, sometimes reading, sometimes just standing in the open window, looking toward her. And each night the pull inside her grew stronger, a mixture of curiosity, longing, and something she hadn't felt in years. She thought about what it meant. Was it just a casual habit? Or was it deliberate? A quiet message meant only for her. She imagined conversations they might have, laughter that might fill the street, and moments of quiet understanding shared across the distance of a few yards. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. She had been hurt before, had learned to guard her heart, but this felt different. Jake noticed her distraction and asked one evening, "You've been staring at that house a lot. Everything okay?" Emma hesitated, then shook her head. I don't know. It's nothing. Just maybe it's the new neighborhood." But it wasn't nothing. It was everything. It was the way the window was left open, the way he seemed to be inviting her into a silent connection, the way her heart seemed to respond without permission. She began to imagine him more vividly. His face, the lines of his hands as he sketched, the tilt of his head when he was lost in thought. She imagined the sound of his voice, gentle and low, and the warmth of his smile. Each evening, the anticipation grew. She found herself looking forward to seeing him more than anything else in the quiet routine of her new life. Then came the night that changed everything. The sky was deep blue, the first stars beginning to sparkle. Emma and Jake were outside pretending to trim the hedges, though Emma kept stealing glances across the street. And then there it was, a small wave. Clearer this time, deliberate. He was standing at the window, looking directly at her. Her heart leaped. Jake noticed her pause. "Hey, maybe you should just go say hi," he said with a grin. Emma shook her head quickly. No, not yet. She didn't know why. Some part of her wanted to run across the street, to knock on the door, to speak, to finally bridge the invisible distance. But another part held back, savoring the tension, the quiet anticipation, the unspoken connection that had grown over days and nights of silent observation. She went inside that night with the image of him at the window burned into her mind. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, imagining what it would be like to step into his world, to hear him speak, to feel the warmth of a smile that might be meant for her alone. Sleep eluded her. Her imagination ran wild with possibilities, conversations that might happen, confessions that might be shared. A story that was just beginning to write itself. By morning, Emma felt a strange mix of excitement and fear. The open window had become a ritual, a quiet invitation, a mystery she couldn't ignore. And though she didn't yet know what it meant, she knew one thing for certain. Something had begun between them. Fragile, delicate, and unspoken, but real, as she sipped her coffee that morning, watching the sunlight spill over the street. Emma whispered to herself, "Tonight, I'll see him again. And maybe this time, I'll wave back." The days that followed moved quickly. Emma found small excuses to be near the window. She lingered longer in the garden, arranged the curtains just so, timed her movements to match the evening light. And every evening, there he was, waiting, sketching, reading, sometimes smiling, sometimes just standing in the soft glow. The connection, though silent, was undeniable. And the anticipation became almost unbearable. It was a tension built on subtle gestures, a glance, a wave, a shared moment of quiet. Emma knew it was risky, even foolish, to feel this way about a man she barely knew. But the heart rarely listens to reason. Each evening, she felt the pull stronger, the longing more acute, and the hope that maybe, just maybe, this quiet ritual could become something more. One night, she caught herself imagining their lives entwined. In a dramatic or reckless way, but in the gentle, quiet companionship that had been missing from both their worlds. Imagined walking across the street, knocking on his door, speaking softly, smiling, and she imagined him responding with warmth, with understanding, with the same curiosity and longing that mirrored her own. As the moon rose high and cast its silver light across the quiet street, Emma stood by the window once more, watching. The old brick house. The open window seemed like a beacon, a signal, a promise of something new. Her heart raced, Her thoughts spun, and she whispered into the night, "Tomorrow, I'll see him again, and maybe he'll speak to me." The quiet ritual of the open window had begun, delicate and tender, a story in the making. A connection that neither of them could yet name, but both felt deep in their hearts. And in that moment, Emma knew that her life, which had once felt ordinary and predictable, was about to change in ways she could not yet imagine. The next evening came faster than Emma expected. The sun had dipped behind the tall maples lining Willow Lane, casting long shadows across the quiet street. The air was warm, tinged with the faint scent of jasmine drifting from her garden, and the soft chirp of crickets filled the pauses between distant car engines and the occasional bark of a neighbor's dog. Emma tried to keep herself busy, arranging flowers in a vase, pretending to sweep the porch, but her eyes kept drifting across the street to the old brick house with the open window. Tonight felt different. She didn't know why, but there was a tension in the air, an electricity she couldn't explain. Daniel was there, as he always was, standing by the window, but this time he didn't just glance in her direction. He looked directly at her, holding his gaze just long enough for her heart to flutter uncontrollably. For a moment, the world seemed to shrink, leaving only her and the man across the street. She caught herself smiling, and she felt a warmth rise in her chest she hadn't felt in years. Jake, as usual, was absorbed in his phone, not noticing the quiet drama unfolding across the street. He leaned back in his chair, scrolling, while Emma leaned against the railing, caught in a silent, unspoken conversation that had begun weeks ago. Their connection had always been subtle glances, small waves, fleeting smiles, but tonight it felt as if the unspoken thread between them had grown stronger, more defined, impossible to ignore. Emma's pulse quickened. She wondered if he felt the same pull, the same curiosity, the same quiet longing she could not resist. Her mind raced with possibilities. What if she crossed the street, knocked on his door, and spoke to him? What if he smiled genuinely and invited her inside for a cup of tea? Her imagination spun wildly, painting scenarios that were tender, emotional, romantic, yet grounded in the reality of two people slowly discovering each other through subtle gestures. Then, without warning, Daniel did something that made her heart skip. He leaned out the window just enough to place something on the sill. Emma's breath caught. It was a white rose, delicate and perfect, its petals slightly glistening in the evening light. She blinked, unsure if she was dreaming. The gesture was tender, deliberate, intimate in a way that words could never capture. It was as if he had been waiting for this exact moment to reach across the distance and speak to her without saying a single word. Emma felt the rose calling to her as if it were a symbol of everything she had been feeling for weeks: the curiosity, the longing, the subtle excitement that had grown in the quiet evenings by the window. Without thinking, she stepped off the porch, rose in hand, and walked across the street. Each step was deliberate, yet her heart raced faster than her feet could carry her. The world around her faded. The houses, the trees, even the faint hum of life around Maplewood disappeared, leaving only the soft glow of the open window and the man who had captured her imagination. Daniel appeared in the doorway as she approached. His hands were tucked nervously into his pockets, his usual calm replaced by an almost vulnerable hesitation. The lines of his face softened in the light, and Emma could see the faintest trace of a smile, shy but warm, waiting for her to bridge the distance. She held out the rose, almost afraid it would vanish if she let go, and he looked at it, then at her with a mixture of surprise and something deeper: recognition, understanding, perhaps even longing. I thought you might like this," he said softly, his voice low and gentle, carrying a warmth that made her chest tighten. There was no pretense, no casual tone, only honesty that touched something deep within her. Emma nodded, unable to speak, feeling tears prick at the corners of her eyes, not sadness, but the overwhelming tenderness of the moment. She felt exposed, yet safe, as if he understood all the subtle emotions she had been holding back. All the quiet thoughts that had accompanied her evenings by the window. For a long moment, they just stood there, the rows between them, a symbol of the delicate bridge they had built over days and nights of silent connection. Emma's heart raced, and Daniel's eyes never left hers. It was an intimacy born not of words, but of attention, of gestures, of noticing each other in a way the world around them could never offer. The air between them seemed to vibrate, a soft electric energy that neither could ignore, a promise of something fragile and beautiful. The street remained still. A light breeze rustled the leaves overhead, brushing against Emma's hair, carrying with it the faint scent of jasmine and freshly cut grass. She inhaled deeply, savoring the moment, wishing it could last forever. Her mind raced with possibilities, imagining conversations, laughter, and gentle touches that had not yet happened but felt inevitable. She imagined long talks over tea, quiet evenings side by side, the comfort of shared silences. The romantic potential of this simple interaction filled her with hope she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Daniel finally spoke again, his voice almost a whisper. I've been hoping you'd notice. Every night. The words were simple, yet they carried weight. They were not declarations of love, not grandiose gestures, but honest and raw, revealing the depth of his feelings without overwhelming. The moment Emma felt her heart swell, she realized she had been hoping the same, waiting for him to reach across the street, to turn subtle gestures into something real, tangible, shared. Her hands tightened around the rose. I noticed, she admitted softly, her voice trembling slightly, filled with a mix of excitement and relief. I've been hoping you would too. The admission hung in the air, delicate, like a note held at the edge of a melody. It was a quiet confession, but it was enough to transform the space between them from curiosity to connection. The evening stretched on, slow and gentle. They talked quietly, words measured and soft, as if afraid to shatter the fragile magic they had discovered. Emma learned that Daniel loved sketching, that he often spent hours in his room trying to capture the quiet beauty of life outside his window. He learned that she loved flowers and the smell of jasmine at night, that she had been enchanted by the subtle ways he had drawn her attention. Every word deepened the connection. Every glance confirmed the shared feeling that had grown between them over weeks of silent observation. Time seemed to stretch and bend around them. The streetlights flickered on, casting golden pools of light across the pavement, but they barely noticed. Emma and Daniel were caught in the moment, the first tangible experience of the bond they had nurtured in silence. It was romantic, yes, but more than that, it was human, two people drawn together by noticing, by subtle gestures, by the shared recognition of loneliness and longing that had existed on both sides of the street. Then, just as a comfortable silence began to settle, a distant bark startled them both. And Emma took a small step back, laughing softly at the sudden intrusion of reality. Daniel smiled, his eyes never leaving hers, and for a moment, nothing else existed but the quiet understanding between them. The rose still in her hand, a fragile symbol of what had begun. She felt a mix of nervousness and excitement at the thought of tomorrow. Tomorrow, she whispered, almost to herself. Tomorrow, maybe we'll talk more. Daniel nodded, the faintest smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. His eyes lingered on hers, filled with unspoken words, with the kind of longing that had fueled their silent nights, and with the soft promise of a beginning neither had dared to imagine before. The open window had been his invitation, and now, for the first time, she had stepped through it. As Emma walked back to her porch, the rose clutched to her chest. She felt a warmth spreading through her body, a thrilling, intoxicating blend of hope and nervousness. The quiet of the street, once just a backdrop to their lives, now seemed alive with possibility. Each light in the houses around them, each rustle of leaves, Even the distant sound of a passing car became part of the delicate narrative unfolding between her and Daniel. That night, she lay in bed, replaying the moment over and over. She imagined what he would do next, what words he might speak, how their connection might grow. The anticipation was both sweet and maddening. A tension that left her heart pounding and her mind swirling with possibilities. She realized with a mix of awe and fear that this was the start of something real, something tender, fragile, yet undeniable. The following days were filled with small but meaningful interactions. Daniel would leave the window open at the same hour, sometimes placing small tokens, a book, a sketch, or a note carefully on the sill. Emma would respond in kind, waving, smiling, or arranging her flowers just so, knowing he noticed. Each gesture deepened their connection, each unspoken message building the foundation of a relationship that was as emotional as it was romantic. They discovered a rhythm together, quiet dance that didn't require words at first but communicated volumes. Emma learned to read his subtle cues, the tilt of his head, the way he held a cup of tea, the fleeting smile when he caught her looking. Daniel learned the same in return, noticing the way she lingered in the garden, the careful movements by the window, the way her eyes lit up when she saw him. Through these simple, fast-paced exchanges, a bond formed, intense yet understated, emotional yet gentle. It was a romance built on observation, curiosity, and mutual respect. A mature connection that promised more than fleeting passion.